Our next speaker is Matt Edmondson. At the end of the OSINT Curious channel, we just did some of the panel were talking about how they were protecting their own privacy. One of the things that they were doing was monitoring for themselves. And this is something I do, a lot of people do, but also organizations do this to protect themselves as part of their security process. And this is the kind of thing that Matt is going to be talking about today. Matt has presented at a ton of conferences. I love listening to Matt. He's a badass. I think I can say that. He works for the US government, has a lot of experience with OSINT and digital forensics. And by night, he's not Batman. He's the principal at Argelius Labs. So let's get started. I know Matt has a lot of content. Thanks for joining us, Matt, and go ahead.
Thank you for the kind words, my friend. Yeah, as John said, Matt Edmondson, worked for the U.S. government by day, doing technical duties. Been doing that for about 20 years now. At night, I do other technical duties, including sometimes teaching for SANS. I teach the SEC 504, which is incident handling and hacker techniques. So it's a good time to talk about both forensics and hacking stuff as well. But today, what we're going to be talking about is threat monitoring, right? Basic persistent threat, because everyone talks about advanced persistent threat, but normally basic persistent threat is plenty, right? There's no need to show off. But persistent monitoring, and that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, jumped one ahead here. I'm going to see if I can go back. Why we do it, how search engines can fit in, can we do it on the dark web? No, stop. And what about social media? So why we do it, lots of reasons. And a lot of us are doing the exact same thing. We just use different verbiage because we have different backgrounds. If you're from more of a military Department of Defense background, you may call it indications and warning, right? Keywords related to an activity or locations of interest. A lot of times people think open source intelligence and they think, well, no, I've got my target. I'm going to do a deep dive. And then I'm done with that, wrap it up, package it up, do the report, move on to the next one, deep dive, repeat. And for some people, that's life. For other people, though, they have a specific set of criteria that they're constantly monitoring on, right? You are responsible for this geographic region, or you are responsible for this threat stream. And so you're kind of running the same searches all the time. And if you can automate those and just have the curated results feed sent to you instead of manually running those every day, like that's a big win. That's a huge win, right? And force protection is another key one, especially when you have personnel located all over the world. The earlier you can kind of get any indications that maybe things are, you have a little bit of civil unrest in that region, a little bit of discontent building up, like the earlier you can get those warnings, obviously the better, because you can do what you need to do to help keep your personnel safe as quickly as possible. So it's very important from like a defense and intelligence type of community. Now, what about the private sector, right? This is very important there too. Intellectual property theft, right? You should know what your keys to the kingdom are, what's actually important to your business. And I've worked with other businesses before where you go in there and you're like, okay, well, I'm assuming you really care about keeping A and C private. And they're like, no, we don't care about A and C. We're really concerned with X and Y. Like, okay. And they may have reasons that don't even necessarily make sense to them, but they have certain legal obligations or other things, but knowing what's important and what to monitor for. And there are other reasons too. I had a student one time who worked in security for a Big Ten university, and they were very concerned with intellectual property theft, research from their labs going out and kind of getting sold for profit. And this person said, like, hey, I have a very, very small team. I know I need to be monitoring for this, but I don't really have the resources to devote to it. Like, what can I do? It's like, well, there's just some simple things that we can do. We can get together with kind of the SMEs, the people who really know certain things to know what key terms are important. What do you need to be looking for on the internet? Be it terms like Operation Paperclip or Vibranium or what's important, and set up things even as simple as Google Alerts to kind of monitor for those, the presence of those being on the internet all of a sudden instead of just in your research lab. And then executive protection, right? This is a really, really big thing for corporations. When you have angry mobs of people all across the world They will get angry at an organization and they will release information about the executives, right? They will dox them. They will start posting things like their home address and family's information on the internet in hopes that people will go mess with them. And if those are your executives and you're responsible for trying to help keep them informed and safe, you want the earliest indication possible, right? You want to be constantly searching for certain criteria that can indicate maybe it's an executive name and a street they live on. If someone posts that on the internet, you want to be able to see that instantly as soon as possible. That's not a search you want to keep on running every 15 minutes manually. It's ridiculous. And then for law enforcement, right? Situational awareness, similar to DoD. Keywords related to an activity and locations of interest. It could be narcotics being sold in your area that are illegal. It could be other illegal activity that you're concerned about in your area. If something is illegal right now in your area and it's a big concern to you, not just illegal and you don't care about it, you're probably going to care about it all year, right? So you don't want to run those manual searches all year. If you can just set these up and have it shoot you notifications when something happens, once again, that's a big win. Force protection, very real, right? I saw a speaker in the on the last talk here talk about Blue Leaks. Blue Leaks was a huge leak of information about law enforcement personnel, some of their work information, some of their personal information, right? It was massive. It was, you see there are 269 gigs, which is a ridiculously large amount of office documents and text documents, right? If anyone tried to download Blue Leaks, you probably had a really, really bad time because the BitTorrent clients that you would normally use, the torrent file was too big. Like it would just break your client, right? We all had to give you some janky torrent file we probably never even used before to get this data. And there were some things there that flagged as malware. That was a pain in the butt to deal with. But once again, it's very, very important. And I had a lot of, I grabbed a copy very, very early, basically the day it was released. And I had a lot of organizations coming to me wanting to know, hey, can you let us know what our exposure is in here? What of our personnel are in this data set? And so we can let them know, right? And there's probably going to be nothing we can ever do to get that taken down offline, but at least we can let them know what's out there, right? And they can take steps that they need to try to mitigate and protect themselves and their families. Now, here's probably the scariest slide of all, right? The last slide in this section, or next to last. These are all blending together, right? I just laid out kind of 3 separate verticals, but these are all really, really blending together now, right? Like, let's say you're a journalist, that is firmly private sector. But if you're constantly writing about the same type of stories, the same areas, the same markets, whatever, you're basically at this point really close to a Department of Defense analyst, right? You have certain things that you always want to be aware about of anything new up and coming, and you want to see that you're doing the same types of searches, you're doing the same type of work. This picture I grabbed, it's from an old episode of The Simpsons. Some of you may know it. And in this episode, they spend the entire episode very scared because a large asteroid they believe is going to come hit their town and destroy them. And then at the very end, the very last of the episode, it just kind of pitters out. And by the time it lands, it's the size of a marble and everything is fine. And they're standing around wondering what to do. And one of them is like, hey, let's go burn down the observatory so this will never happen again. And at the time when I first watched it, I thought that was hilarious, right? Except now it's kind of true, right? You see like angry mobs all over the place. And a lot of times it's like, hey, you know what? We're done here. Let's go to the media now, right? And I remember last year, right? There were some nights when there were people sleeping inside of television studios like 30 Rock because it wasn't safe for them to leave. So once again, like physical security, we've always had security guards. It's always been a thing, but these are really kind of crossing over, and it's very real now and very important. So these are really kind of all blending together, like I said. Now, this is the last slide in this section. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. The title of my slide was missing a few words, right? It's persistent threat monitoring. The missing words were on a budget, right? Because a lot of us may not have a budget. There are some fantastic tools out there. I may mention 1 or 2 over the course of this presentation. But if you have no budget to afford it, that doesn't really do you any good, right? Like I've seen people, and I've been there myself. It's like you're talking with someone, you're like, hey, I have this problem, like any ideas on this? And they're like, oh yeah, no, just spend this money and buy this tool and you'll be fine. And they walk off, and it's like they leave thinking that they're, smart and informed and they just helped you out. And you're sitting there like feeling like you just got hit by a truck, right? Like, thanks. I probably already knew about that, but B, we don't have a budget for it. And so what we're going to talk about things in this talk are things you can do that are absolutely 100% free or that are extremely close to free, like a couple dollars a month, right? Like we're going to be doing things here, assuming that we don't have a budget to go pay for some of the things out there that do amazing jobs in this space. So now we're talking about searching for things on the internet. So you're like, well, can't I just use search engines? Well, kinda, right? Kinda. And the king of this kind of stuff is Google Alerts. Google Alerts is fantastic. You put in some criteria to, notify me every day or a daily digest, what live real time when it happens, whatever. I don't need to talk about this too much, but this is a fantastic options for simple alerts for persistent monitoring. Google, though, as it skips past the slide again, is not the only game in town, right? There are times, anyone who's done a lot of OSINTs, there are times you don't want to use Google, you want to use Yandex, right? You want to use these other search engines. I gave a talk last year at the OSINT Summit on breach data. And I joke like, hey, listen, if you're trying to buy drugs online, you're going to have a better, in your local community, you're going to have a better luck with Bing than you are Google. And people kind of joked and, kind of laughed, and it was kind of a joke, but also kind of not, right? About a year and a half ago, I was doing work with a research university, and they were having their students kind of gather statistics, information, trends on people selling narcotics in different communities online illicitly. And they would flat out tell you, like, they were having a lot better luck on Bing than they were Google, right? Google censors a lot of results. And this isn't conspiracy. This isn't political. This isn't anything like that. It can be lawsuits. There can be a million different reasons. I'm not trying to assess a reason to it. I'm sure everyone does it, but it's good to try things in different sources sometimes. And Google is a fantastic search engine, right? It is a privacy dumpster fire. There are a lot of huge issues, but for actual searching and finding things, it's really good. But nothing is perfect. And so we want to branch out and try other things as well. There are some of us on this stream that may be old enough to remember when search engines used to brag about searching other search engines, right? It sounds ridiculous, but it's like, why limit yourself to just Google? Like, come use us. We search 23 other search engines, right? Ours has a dog, ours has a butler. These were things that people used to kind of brag about and advertise, and they kind of all felt by the wayside as most people kind of settled on Google and then branched off it maybe for other certain specific tasks. But what these were referred to as meta search engine, right? A search engine that searches other search engines. There are still some out there. And there's one called CRSX that has some really, really cool characteristics, right? CRSX is a meta search engine that you can host yourself. You can host it on your computer. You can fire up a box on the internet on AWS and Amazon for $3, $5 a month that'll run this just fine. And you can basically fire up your own little search engine. It's private, public, whatever. You don't even need to do that though. There are public instances of CRSX too. If you go to the CRSX website, you can find people running it, right? And this is one of those meta search engines that searches other search engines. And I'm not saying it's the best search engine or you always need to use this or anything like that. But like I said, it has some very, very interesting characteristics. And we'll look at one of them right now. I've been writing OSINT tools, scrapers, and everything else for well over a decade at this point. Sometimes scraping web pages is very, very easy. Sometimes it's very, very difficult. Search engines, like doing Google, can be very, very difficult, right? People that write search engine optimization tools oftentimes struggle with this because things aren't consistent. You have ads, you have paid placements, you have different logos, things move around, things change, the name of things change. It is not easy to reliably parse a lot of times search engines to get those results and automate it, right? They want to sell that data, they want to do other things with it. Look at this though, CRSX down here at the bottom. I sat there and I put in a term. I got my results and I'm looking at my results in text just like I would any other search engine. But if you look here, I can actually view these results in CSV, right? So a spreadsheet, in JSON or an RSS. This is fantastic. Think about automating this, right? If we were to make this kind of manual and automated and always banging off, instead of having to struggle to parse things, we can just write some code and get these results back and just ask for it in the JSON format. So it's consistent and designed to be easily parsed, not taking steps to actively try to keep us from parsing it and messing with us and making our life more difficult. And that is a really, really big help. And so if we can do it from the front end, right, we can do it from the back end. So here's just a snippet of Python code where give it a keyword to search for, just the general category, right? Don't limit yourself to images or science or anything else. I only want to see things that are new to you within the past day. I'm looking for real-time type of stuff, not historic stuff at this point, and I want my results in JSON. And we can start to get back the results once again in things that are very, very easy to parse. And if something meets our criteria, can shoot us a notification. If you're interested in this, you want to take a look for it. This is the last we'll talk about it in this talk, but Justin Seitz, who I would not like kind of besmirch real programmers by calling myself a programmer. I can write code that functions and gets the job done, but Justin Seitz is a much better programmer than I could ever dream of being. He wrote a blog post a couple of years ago where Pastebin's API key when it was on sale, and that API key has some serious issues now. It's a shadow of its former self, unfortunately, and CRSX to kind of make this, monitoring pipeline. So if you're interested in this, go check it out. It's a good read. I've got a heavily modified version of this that I still use to this day. All right. So this one right here, right? Can we do this on the dark web? No, go away. And yeah, we kind of can. It's just dark web, right? Start off with a couple of slides here. This is, did it jump past something? Yes, it did, right? There are solid commercial options for this space, but once again, you may not have a budget for them. I'm not going to assume you do. I'm just not going to say, oh yeah, go buy one of these two tools and go on with your life, right? I love Flashpoint. I remember last year there were people that were taking things like Swedish drain cleaners and trying to sell it on the dark web and other places as cures for COVID, right? Pointing, hey, it has this one chemical and this one scientist wrote a white paper over here saying this is a cure for COVID. So, buy this to clean your drains, or, there was some like different vet medications and things like that. And then it also might cure COVID. And looking for those, like, okay, how prevalent is this out there, right? I could take some of those keywords, put it in a tool like Flashpoint, be like, oh, yep, here's 2 sellers selling it on these 3 different marketplaces, problem solved. And it's fine and easy. But once again, you may not have a budget for that, right? So I don't want to assume you do. Also, due diligence is 100% a thing. And sometimes you have to check the box, right? There might be something that you're like, this is dumb. And a lot of us have been in this situation, right? Like I said, I've worked in the government for over 20 years, not saying anything, but sometimes you're like, this is really, really dumb. And these are all the things that it's going to miss. Cool, understood. You still need to do it, right? And so you just kind of go forward and do the best job you can with the capabilities and resources that you currently have. Richard Marcinko, the gentleman who started up SEAL Team 6, always used to say, you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. And I've been telling myself that for this point for over 20 years all the time, right? Something comes up, I'm like, just remind myself, you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. And sometimes, like I said, something is missing things, it's not perfect, but you're still trying to go forward and do the best job you can. God bless you for that, all right? Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of good. And this is one of, to me, the most important concepts in just about everything, right? Like I said, I teach information security too. It's very important there. The perfect solution fallacy of, well, this isn't good. There are these other things that it can't do. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing, right? And if you have like 3 solutions that are just okay, that's a heck of a lot better than not having anything at all, right? And as you start to stack multiple solutions that are all flawed, you end up with a very, very reasonable and a very honestly fair working good solution. So one of the things I hate most in life is people that come up and want to blast holes in things without coming up with an alternative, right? They just want to point out a couple flaws, like, oh, the little lights aren't twinkling from Christmas Vacation, and then go on with their business, right? Without pointing out a better solution. So no, once again, sometimes you just have to do it. Robert Watson Watt, he was working on early warning systems like radar to try to protect London during the Blitzkrieg. And he said flat out one time, give them the 3rd best option to go with. The second comes too late and the best never comes, right? Sometimes you just need to roll something out and then kind of go from there, realizing that improvements is not a straight line. You don't go from A to B and then release it. Sometimes it's a spiral, right? You're gradually getting better and better and better. Last slide on this topic. I've written a lot of OSINT tools. Like I said earlier, I've been writing OSINT tools for over a decade. I don't try to make tools that are perfect, right? I try to make tools that are useful. And everyone on here that has, been using my tools are used daily across the world by numerous different agencies. And everyone on here that's using them just kind of shaking their heads now, like, yeah, that's fair, right? Like, I'm sorry for making you guys doing command line. I'm sorry for some of the other things, but I'm just trying to get it out and go on to the next one. So please accept my sincere apology for that, but don't worry about trying to make things perfect, right? Trying to make something that's useful. So now back to the dark web. We were supposed to go with this section. there are a couple dark search engines out there, right? This is one that was talked about yesterday on another talk I saw, darksearch.io. It's a newer one. It came up in mid 2019 in May, I believe. And they came out there and you see says they're the first real dark web search engine, right? And then like a little asterisk over in the bottom corner, according to us. And if you click on that, it has like a little breakdown between them and EMEA, which I love the EMEA search engine too. But dark search, completely free. They said there's a lot of things they want to roll out in version 2. Version 2 hasn't happened yet. I don't know how actively they're still working on that, but I do know that they are still actively indexing new content that you could see. And if you, the font's probably way too small right here too. It talks about like, hey, they actually have Google dorking too. Not nearly as sophisticated as some of the Google dorks you can do, but they have a couple options. This option right here, this search syntax is show me anytime you see the word oxy and the word buy within 10 words of each other. That's how you do it in the search engine. So you can see there, I got 363 results and I can go down to them if that was something that was relevant to my interest, right? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But once again, this is a free way to search the dark web. Not the only way, right? But one other thing that's really, really cool about dark search is they have an API. Their API is very well documented. And if you see right here by very well documented, that is the entire documentation. Like I am not even joking. It fit on a slide. The bottom of the response is cut off. If I didn't have my logo there, you could see the whole response. That would be their complete and entire API documentation. It's amazing. You can see we're limited to 30 queries a minute, which is more than reasonable, right? For a free service, you don't have to pay anything for. If you've been trying to learn Python or another language, like Python is it's pretty much the only thing I code anymore. I love it. But if you're starting to maybe write simple scrapers, simple things to parse services, you're not going to find an easier one to start off with than this. You're just flat out not, because you can see here, you send a response, or excuse me, you send a request, you get back the response, there it is. This is literally the entire documentation. So it's a good one to practice on, and you can let this running. And then once again, for completely free, you have built something to kind of monitor the dark web, right? And new criteria coming up and shooting you alerts. So that's kind of cool. Is it perfect? No, but it's working and it's free. It's something you can actually do. So last little section here, right? Let's talk about Twitter. And speaking of free, let's talk about the free API. And anytime you start talking about Twitter and you start talking about the API, you start talking about the free versus the Firehose. And everyone's, for those that aren't aware, the Firehose it's the API for Twitter. And they say like, hey, we have a free API, but it's limited. Like you don't get everything. It's good. It's good for playing around with, but it's not for serious users, right? If you want to do serious analytics, serious use, then you need to pay and get the Firehose. And spoiler alert, the Firehose is not cheap in any way, shape, or form to try to access that. But let's take a look at a breakdown and see if maybe the free stuff can still be usable for our purposes. So the first difference you see here, you see have the standard one, aka the free one at the very top. And then you have a couple premium ones. So the standard one, it says, is good for 7 days, whereas the premium ones for 30 days, right? You only go back 7 days of history, whereas on this one, you can go back 30 days, or then you guys start to get into the entire archive. Well, that sounds good. But if we're writing a persistent monitor, if we're writing something that's constantly checking for this criteria and notifying us, 7 days is way more than I need. Give me 1 day, give me 7 hours. I don't care, right? Like I'm going to be checking this search term like every few minutes. And so if like I said, give me 7 hours, like it's irrelevant to me. Just, give me my results. So that's really not going to stop me. Under a query capability, we see the standard only includes standard operators. The premium includes premium operators. Okay, that's once again, the standard operators are fine for me. By standard operators, what they mean is you can basically do from the API what you can do just by using Twitter, right? You can do some really cool things with Twitter searches by geocode, which is very difficult now because hardly anything's geocoded, or by language, either inclusive or exclusive. Like you've got a lot of options there. Premium operators, it's more for, I use the example of the Firehose is very, very necessary if we wanted to, like we just had the Super Bowl right here in America. If I wanted to monitor how effective one of my advertising campaigns was from the Super Bowl, I'm not going to be using the free API. I need the Firehose, right? The pure volume to see everything, see trends, things like that. I absolutely need the premium, some of their premium operators. I need the full data set. But for just isolated monitoring criteria that's very rare, that I might get an alert or two on a day, The standard one seems to be fine to me. It really, really does, right? The scariest one is that last category, data fidelity, easy for me to say. Standard, incomplete, and then you see premiums full. So we look at the next slide here, and it says that the Twitter's API is similar, not identical, but similar to the search UI available in like Twitter's mobile or web client. So they're basically saying the API is similar to what you use in the website. But spoiler alert, you're not seeing everything on the website anyway. And so once again, monitoring a real-time advertising campaign, trying to map out huge giant networks, things like that, maybe I want the Firehose. But if I'm just trying to search for criteria, and I've done numerous side-by-side comparisons of searching for things in the Twitter GUI, like a normal web browser, and then through the API, my results are identical, and it's free. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up as a win, right? If I can do things where, hey, if this meets my criteria, shoot me an alert, instead of me having to go in every 15 minutes, half hour, whenever I remember, and do these searches and see if anything hits. Yeah, I am really, really good with that. Really good. There are limits, right? We can see some of the documentation here, just a small portion of it. There's plenty more. But depending on how we authenticate, either as a user or an app, and registering with a Twitter API is completely free. And you can like pick your little app ID, everything. So you can register as an app or a user. If we authenticate as a user, we can do 180 requests every 15 minutes. That's a ton. And if you register as an app, it's even more. We can do 450 requests every 15 minutes. That is a ton, once again, for free. We can do basically the same type of queries we can do from the front end, right? Like I said, we can just give it certain keywords, certain individuals. We'll look at some examples of this. We can give it geocodes. And like I said, excuse me, only a very small portion of Twitter activity now, very almost inconsequential, has geocodes, but still as a matter of due diligence, it might be worth putting bubbles around certain locations, see what's going on there. You can do languages. I only want to see tweets in certain languages, or only want to see tweets that aren't in a certain language. We have lots of options here. So do we have a tool / methodology for this to take advantage of this Twitter API and kind of automate this process? And the answer is yes, we do. Enter Gamera. Why did I call it Gamera? Because I'm basically a 7-year-old, right? I like Japanese monster movies on Mystery Science Theater. Don't judge me. How does Gamera work? This makes no sense right now. I promise you will make very, very much sense in about 15 minutes. But we have our search criteria. Then it goes into the grinder, checks a database to see if it's already alerted on that tweet to the distro list. And if it hasn't, it enriches the email, and then it sends the emails. So start off with search criteria. Remember, we're allowed 180 to 450 queries, depending on how we authenticate, every 15 minutes for free. We could have 100 different queries, all running 9 seconds apart, and still be comfortable under the limit, right? That is really, really close to free time. If I'm doing a search every 15 minutes and notifying me live when it happens, that's really close to free time for pretty much every use case you're going to need. So entry here, the actual search term. And I've got some of these items when it comes up here in a second blanked out. We'll see it all at the very end. This is just so we kind of focus on certain things. So this is what some of the Twitter queries could look like. These are just examples, right? We have this top one here, your business, and then a couple 2 locations. You see all of my queries at the very end have a filter of, I don't want to see retweets, right? Minus filter retweets. If someone tweets something out that meets my criteria, and then 17 people retweet that, I don't want to get 18 notifications. I just want that initial notification that something met the criteria. I can then click on a link and go look at it myself and see if it's trending, see how popular it is, right? But I don't want to get inundated with notifications. That's why we're going to set things up like we are here. I want to keep this with a very, very good signal to noise ratio. Next one, right? These are all just example queries. Could be kill or shoot or murder, and then maybe a couple of executive names. Could be geocodes or on a specific lat long with a 1 kilometer radius. Could be things doxing and your organization names, right? All just example queries here. And then it could be certain words maybe around your organization and leaks, right? Leaks, breach data, things coming out. So these are all just examples, and you're really limited by your imagination here on what you want to do. Now, the grinder selection, right? And you're all wondering what in the heck is a grinder? It's just like a meat grinder. Raw components go in and a more refined product comes out. That's it. I gave a static grinder picture here. I could have gotten a nice animated GIF of like sausage coming out, but I chose not to, so you're welcome. There are commercial products charging a lot of money to give us a curated feed to improve our signal to noise ratio, right? I'm not going to name and shame, but some of you know some that I am not a big fan of. We can do a pretty good job of this on our own. We can, right? And so what you see down here, like this graphic, all the noise of Twitter or anything else, right? Just all these, on social media and anywhere else, all this noise, we don't care about this. We don't want to get inundated with this. It's the stuff that's really important to us that jumps up here to signal. That's what we wanted to see, right? And so how do we effectively kind of monitor for this and set the clipping level at a point that's appropriate for us? How can we do that for free, right? And we can do a pretty good job of this on our own with very minimal effort. It sounds like a lot of work. Maybe you're not going to be smart enough to do it. It's complete BS, right? If I was selling this product instead of just like posting it on GitHub and YOLOing it, I would be very secretive about how it worked. And I would call the grinder proprietary AI. Like I just flat out would. It's just lists. All it is lists flat out. And you'll see it's very, very simple. We can all make an update list, right? I do forensics. I see what some of y'all put on lists on your devices. Very disappointed, right? I know what people put on lists. Very easy to update, very easy to make, very easy to maintain. And the lists are just text files. And then at the beginning of the Python code, we can just load in these text files. And you'll see like the little snippets of Python code I have. Once again, I don't consider myself a programmer, right? I can write functional code that gets the job done. I write things very, very simply. No one would ever look at my code and say it was elegant. I write my code almost like Lego blocks, just like little reusable chunks that I can stick together and easily modify. Code that I don't program every single day. So code that if I come back a year from now and I'm like, well, I was drinking a lot when I wrote that code. So what was I thinking? And then I can easily pick up where I left off, see what I was doing and make sense to edit it. And so I think if anyone actually tries to go look at my code, if you program Python at all, I think you'll have an easier time than you would looking at maybe necessarily some other projects. I try to keep things simple because I'm not a full-time programmer. I just do what try to automate things for me and my coworkers, frankly. But like I said, then my lists are just basically plain text files that are imported in at the beginning of my code. And so let's take a look at what some of these lists are. Come on, click. You want to click. All right, back to the arrows. So aggressive words, right? Think curse words or derogatory words. And these can be tough because they can have a positive connotation too, right? Sarcasm, right? That was bleeping amazing, right? Well, that was a curse word, but it was in a positive context. And so you don't want to go crazy with assigning these like a ton of points to our score, which we'll see in a little bit. But it should be worth some points, right? Because a lot of times if people start spouting out cuss words or something, a lot of times it does have that negative connotation. It means they're angry with it. And so maybe that meets the criteria a little bit more, it bumps up the score, and maybe we're a little more likely to want to see that. So curse words or derogatory words. Harmful words, right? Think words like murder, kill, and unfortunately far worse, right? And if you're wondering what could be far worse than that, go work threat streams against like females in the media, right? And my therapist told me I have to stop quoting Drake so much, but like you're going to see some stuff you don't want to see, you ain't ready for, right? People are absolutely horrible sometimes, and it's just very, very sad to see. So words like this, if someone's using those types of words in this context, we absolutely want to assign that a lot of points, right? This is much more likely to be something that we want to kind of go up to the signal and fire us an alert email so that we can be aware of it. Incident words. Think words people might be planning a demonstration outside of one of your facilities or in executive homes, right? Trying to plan up a gathering, a protest, something like that, near one of your executives' addresses, near one of your locations. Once again, the earliest you can find out about that, you may not be able to do anything to stop it, but at least you can take steps to try to mitigate that, right? So the first time that your executive finds out that something happened isn't when their spouse is calling them because there was a bunch of people on their lawn right now protesting. Context words. These are a tricky one, potentially very, very useful, but very tricky. Let's pick one. All right, let's do this. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of an analyst for Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. They are a fantastic agency. They're full of amazing men and women, do great work every day. Lots of working the child pedophiles, child predator, things like that type of threat streams, and some other ones as well. But most of the time when they're talked about, people are not referring to them by HSI. They're referring to them as their kind of parent organizations, ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, right? And immigrations is a hot button topic in a lot of countries in this world, and the United States is no different there. And so imagine trying to set up alerts for force protection facility, whatever it is, when one of your main key terms is ICE. So if you're trying to set up alerts and one of your main key terms is a word that is that common, you're going to have a really, really bad time with that. And so what context words are is this. You can give it a list of 10 words, right? Maybe like agents, deportation, immigration, whatever those 10 words would be relevant to your business. And if you set the context flag on an alert to, no, it has to have a context words in it, otherwise do not fire the alert, it is not going to fire an alert unless one of those words is present in that tweet, in that criteria. And this is going to greatly improve the signal to noise ratio. So like I said, you don't always need context words. It's not even common that you need them. But if you're going to be searching for a keyword that is very, very common, context words are an absolute lifesaver to kind of force that tweet as being much, much more likely to have context to you. Baskin Robbins words, once again, I name things like I'm a 7-year-old because I kind of am. Keywords you need to monitor, but only for very, very short periods of time, right? Like maybe monitoring threats against people doing, remember like the debates and certain things like that coming up for the last presidential election. That would be a really, really hot button topic. People would be getting horrible threats, lots of things going on for like a week or two, right? And then it was kind of died down. So you don't want to start modifying your list for that, knowing it's only going to be a 1 or week 2 thing, right? Or week 1 or 2 week thing. COVID cures, right? Was monitoring for stuff, people trying to sell COVID cures and doing some really dangerous things out there. But I knew that wasn't going to last forever, right? You knew that eventually like a real vaccine would come out, other things would happen. And so for short-term monitoring, this list can help us kind of get some results now without having to make permanent changes to the rest of our lists. But once again, it's just a text file, super easy to modify. Fake news words. It's a white list of terms or a loud list where a tweet contains that word. We don't want to see it. I remember, I forget what alert it was, but I had one alert where like a lot of the things that were tripping it were people angrily replying to other tweets with, but what about Benghazi? The tweet was about something completely unrelated or whatever. And then they reply with like, what about Benghazi? And just like certain words they were using, certain things were kind of tripping one of my alerts, but I didn't care about any of it. And so I like put in my allow list, like, I don't want to see any tweet if it has the word Benghazi in it, right? And that was just a weird kind of thing to kind of filter around some of the things I was seeing on one of my alerts. And so it's just one example of if a news story or something is causing people to say things that tripping your alert, but you don't care about it, there's probably a word or two you can add in this list to once again cut down on that noise and only see the signal that you care about. The username ignore list, right? And I have a picture here with an old man yelling in cloud, kind of like the person I imagine, what about Benghazi? And that tweet, a lot of times the username ignore list, it's not a person though. It's it's just some type of other automated account. Like I have persistent monitoring by geo coordinates around a couple facilities outside Washington, DC. And some of those will get hits with people posting jobs, not even jobs of that organization, but jobs like the Quiznos a block over or something else, or there's a craft brewery just down the street. And so you'll get alerts coming out of that geocord. I don't want to see those, right? I don't want to see those. So I can just add the usernames that are, tweeting out maybe jobs in that area to my username ignore list. And so once again, that's not kind of clouding my emails. And I'm back down to only getting a couple of emails a day like I want, not a flood of emails because I've got other things to do going on with my life. Once we have our lists, right? Once we kind of made these text files and we have our list, all the grinder does is this very, very simple code, right? We make everything lowercase so we're not missing things based off capitalization. Here you can see just some examples, right? If the tweet has something in there for any word that's in my aggressive words that's in that tweet, add 3 to its risk score, right? If it's got a context word, add 3 to its risk score too. And then right here, kind of flip that flag for has context. And most of my alerts don't need context, but if they do, now the flag is flipped for yes. One of the context words is in this alert, so now you're allowed to fire. Here, harmful words, right? Murder, kill, even worse type of words in there. For every word that's in that tweet from this list, add 10 to the risk score, right? I want that passing that threshold. I probably want to see that tweet if it's missing my other criteria based on, think of how tight the criteria were in the very search criteria we started looking at the beginning, right? When it was executive names and then my organization or, certain locations in my organization, I'm already working with tight criteria. Now I'm just trying to even tighten that criteria even more to where I'm ignoring the things that don't care to me, but I want these things that seem aggressive, that seem like I need to pay attention to them to rise to the top. Distro list, this was pretty simple, right? I don't want to, if you start this up for one business unit in your organization, now you've got 3 other business units that would also like a couple things to monitor. I don't want you to have to spin up like 4 instances of this to monitor for all of that, right? Just fire up the one, and now you can have different distro lists for different alerts. It's very, very simple to do. So that way you only need one instance of this running, different distro lists for different threat streams. Force the context, we already talked about that, right? And so now, the final one here, I only spend a second on this, but kind of what this looks like unmodified in this little search criteria file. We have our raw queries, what distro list we want it to go to if something meets that criteria, what grinder we want to go to, so we can set up multiple grinders with different kind of logics, different point systems. If context is going to be required, and you see, I think all of these are 0. And then another thing with the distro number, and this is just for database tracking purposes. And so now one more time, we'll look at this. Search criteria, fairly straightforward. The grinder, just going through those lists and adding points if something meets that criteria. Checks a database to see if it's already alerted that distro list on the tweet. If it hasn't, then it goes to fire the alert, but it enriches the emails first. For a database on mine, I'm using DynamoDB on Amazon AWS. It's completely free. You could easily modify it to something else, but I'm not even close. I could have 100 of these running, I think, and I wouldn't even become close to sniffing the free limit of what Amazon lets me get away with. So real quick here, I know we're finishing up. What do I mean with enriching, right? If you know what show this is from and you know this scene, when we're allowed to like hang out and drink again, we should totally hang out and drink again. One of the things for enriching is translation, right? What if you're getting tweets in languages that you don't natively speak, right? Whoever's receiving these alerts may not natively speak. Amazon gives free translation, 2 million characters a month for a year. And even if you're outside your year, it's $15 per million characters. That's a ton. And their translation service is really, really good. 1 million characters, as an example, is over 7,000 tweets. So if you have your criteria tight to where you only get like 10 alerts a day, that's years worth of alerts right there for $15 worth of translation. And this wasn't a real alert. I just picked words in other languages like Russian and Arabic and other things to see how the translation was. I liked it. And I'm like, that looks pretty solid to me, right? I do not speak Arabic, but wow, that's really good. It's kind of funny too, is machine translation will never be as good as a human translation for most human translators. And I think we all know that, especially translators. But one of the main consumers of Amazon translation services is translation services, because the translation services that people pay so much money for will use Amazon to translate and then just give it to one of the humans to kind of clean up. So it's kind of funny that even if you pay a ton of money to have humans do it, a lot of times they're still just using this to do like 90% of the work and then giving it to a human the final, or saving for the humans for the final technical stuff. John, you coming on? You cut me off. Do it. Cut me off.
You got some time. Go for it.
All right, super quick. We talked about fake AI. Let's add fake machine learning to our resume here too. Python has a library called TextBlob. It's free. You can just add it into Python, and that will start to give us very, very simply here some sentiment analysis for objective versus subjective and negative versus positive. Sentiment analysis is a dumpster fire. Everyone who's trying to play with it knows it for the most part, but if you want to try to check it, it is something in there that you can kind of add to your alerts as well. Do you need to leave your computer 24/7 to do this? Nope. You can put all this in Amazon in the AWS cloud. My stack running this cost me about $3 a month, right? Amazon has very, very good documentation. Last year, I need to finish it up, but last year I wrote like 3 parts on my blog, Digital Forensics Tips, on nation state quality OSINT on a Taco Bell budget, on using some of these AWS services for OSINT. The AWS documentation is fantastic. It doesn't need to be replicated. The reason I wrote this blog is just to make you aware of what's out there, because once again, that's a problem. When you talk to someone that does this every day and they're just, oh, yeah, no, like I would just set that up as a Lambda function to DynamoDB and use SES to shoot you an alert. And you're like, let's pretend I don't know what that means. Can you explain it? So I kind of try to walk through that, not trying to replicate or duplicate Amazon's documentation, just kind of a gentle introduction to what some of these are, because I'm 6'4", but I'm very gentle. If you want to look at the code of this, it's on my GitHub under a Gamma right there. You see the links that I know it's out there. And that's it in 44 minutes, 12 seconds under my time limit.
Nicely done, Matt. Fantastic.